In October of 1993, the first body part of Martha Bacon was discovered in a rural area in Wright County, Minnesota. She was victim number 8 of sex workers who were targeted by a serial predator or killer in the Twin Cities. The difference with Martha's case that finally sparked public outcries. She was the first victim to be dumped in Wright County. In this episode of Aren't You the Girl, I'll be continuing my search for answers in Martha Bacon's horrific murder and introduce a friend of Martha's who has joined me in this search. Martha Bacon is one of the more puzzling and terrifying unsolved murders we have in Minnesota, and one of the most unknown. I covered her case in episode 3 about some of the issues that may have caused her case to not be adequately shared with the news cycles. If you have not listened to that episode, you don't necessarily need to understand this episode, but I would suggest you listen to that one as well. To my knowledge so far, we don't have many dismemberment cases similar to hers. I actually can't think of any case that resembles hers anywhere. Body parts of Martha's were retrieved from house dogs over the course of a year within rural residences throughout Wright County, Minnesota. What the residences had to witness in her case left them haunted and absolutely traumatized. A woman in her 80s who discovered her elbow reported that every time she closed her eyes, she saw the elbow lying there. All of her body parts were found except for her torso, arm, and hand. Since releasing episode 3, I too have stayed haunted by Martha's story. Within a week or two of releasing my initial Martha episode, I connected with a man named Jerry Ayers who urgently reached out to me regarding Martha. Jerry is from the group Supernatural Investigators of Minnesota, and recently he had wanted to try to add cold cases into the paranormal mix. He has been instrumental in helping the family of 1996 homicide victim Cassandra Willis and pushing Minneapolis law enforcement to do more in her case. I'll be covering Cassandra's case in a future episode. Jerry had also known Martha Bacon and had also been haunted by her slaying. Jerry had sold cat food at a time in the late 1980s and would sell cat food to Martha. He would drop it off at people's homes, including Martha, and at times would see Martha out and about in the Twin Cities, usually walking alone. They were friendly to each other, and Jerry would give rides to Martha when he saw her someplace alone. One time Martha said to Jerry, "You know, you are so kind and being a good friend to me. I should let you know something about me," she says. "I'm a hooker." Jerry had no idea that she was a street sex worker. She was very put together and was never in sketchy areas, to his knowledge of seeing her. He assumed she was working at a gas station he had seen her outside of frequently. They stayed friendly, and Jerry did not judge Martha, though he did wonder why she was doing that line of work. At some point, Jerry had switched careers, and Martha had moved out of the area, and within time, they never crossed paths again. One day, Jerry had picked up a newspaper and saw a headline reading, "Prostitute's dismembered body part found by dog," with a picture and name bearing Martha Ann Bacon. Jerry was actually spoken to by police because she had his phone number written somewhere still, and they checked who he was in relation to Martha during the investigation. Ever since, he had wondered what had happened to this kind young woman and why no one was paying for what they had done to her. Her name was Martha Ann Bacon, but she liked to be called Marty. Everyone weaving throughout her episode knew her as Lisa, Marty, Elise, or Martha. To keep it easier to follow along with the people and facts of the case, I'll be referring to her as Martha or Marty. Martha was abducted from the West Broadway and Lyndale area of North Minneapolis, where she frequently would solicit customers, on September 26, 1993. The first discovery of remains was on October 14, 1993, where her arm was discovered. Both dogs and their paws in this discovery were clean and dry, indicating that the hand wasn't in water. October 20th, a repairman calls to report that he had seen a dog on the date of the 13th or 14th carrying what he thought was a ham in its mouth. The dog was tracked to a farm in the same area and produced femur and humerus bones. October 23rd, 2 dogs dragged home arm and leg bones near a farm in Silver Creek. The farm is about a quarter mile north of where her elbow was discovered. In photographs, it's noted that some cut and puncture wounds were on her hands, which were believed to be defense wounds. It's believed the time of death was about 2 days prior to her remains being found on October 14th, which means Martha could have been kept alive since she was last seen on September 26th. The person who did it was familiar with the area of farms, woods, and water west of Monticello. The swamp edge is close to gravel roads amid farmlands. It would be easy for someone to throw human body parts from the roadside into a watery grave throughout that area of Silver Creek. To have such a violent end led me to wonder, what kind of life did Martha have? No judgment on her life and actions, but how did a seemingly kind and giving young woman get trapped in a street sex working cycle? Jerry had no inkling that Martha had worked the streets until she had told him. Many of the witnesses in her case also didn't immediately connect that she was working the streets either. But once Martha had made a connection or a friendship with someone, she would open up and tell them that she was a hooker, in her words. Martha did not have a vehicle and had never been married. She had an extensive criminal record of theft, possession of stolen property, narcotics, and prostitution. She had recently gotten a paralegal degree from Wisconsin, but had been unable to hold a job for any length of time. Possibly because of her job history, she was unable to find work in her field. She was described as a loner and didn't associate much with other sex workers. Martha would frequent Sonny's Bar on Lake in Chicago, smoked menthol cigarettes, and was suspected of having issues with alcohol during her final months. What is apparent through her reports, Martha was always very kind and would go out of her way to help someone if she could. Martha had been living with her parents from summer of 1991 to the summer of 1993. She left to visit friends in the city between Memorial Day and the first week of June and never returned home to live. Sometime early summer 1993, a man I'll be referring to only as Mike throughout the episode saw her at White Castle on Broadway Avenue, North Minneapolis. Martha was black and blue from being beat up. Mike gave her his telephone number and told her to call him if she needed a safe place to stay. She called a week or two later and moved in. Mike was the caretaker of the building and therefore lived there rent-free, so it didn't really cost him anything to have anyone extra in the apartment. All Martha was expected to pay for was her food. For the first few weeks of her stay at his apartment, she had slept on the couch in the living room and didn't go anywhere. She was recovering from being severely beat up. Martha would at times be gone for 2 or 3 days at a time, sometime over the weekend, returning on Sunday. Mike was aware Martha was a sex worker. He stated he was trying to help her, thinking she might get a legitimate job if given the opportunity. Martha told him that she received death threats against her parents if she left the business. Mike talked to her about her family and her work. she told him that she felt like the black sheep of the family. Concerning her sex work, she told him she likes to work during the daytime because nighttime was too risky. On July 18th, Mike receives a call from Martha, who asks him to remove money from her belongings in her bedroom at the apartment. He brings it to her at a North Minneapolis address. On July 19th or 20th, Mike observed that Martha was beaten about her head and face. She also had a large laceration across her chest. When asked about what had happened, Martha stated that she was trying to get revenge on her ex-boyfriend and was beaten, then stating the chest laceration was caused by running into a fence while running away from him. Starting mid-September, Martha becomes a regular at Jug Off liquor store. She comes in alone and buys a pint or half a pint of the cheapest vodka available. Mike brought Martha to her parents' home on September 26th to pick up some clothing. This was the final time her parents had seen her alive. According to Mike, a guy called the apartment the next morning on September 27th and asked for Lisa. He said his name was Eddie and that he had dropped her off in a bad part of town and was now looking for her. He knew that she was a sex worker and said he was watching her back the morning she disappeared. Eddie said that he had last seen her on 21st and Aldrich at about 12:45 to 1 a.m. on the morning of September 27th. He states he saw Martha almost every day that summer, but after the early morning hours on September 27th, he had not seen or heard from her again. Who was Eddie? Eddie said he first met Marty, or Lisa, at White Castle about a year before. He described their relationship as they were dating. He saw Martha almost every day, with sometimes a few days going in between seeing each other. A few months after meeting, she told Eddie that she was moving in with a guy named Mike in Brooklyn Park, saying that her parents were overprotective of her. Eddie was in the house a few times with Martha, but had never met Mike. Eddie had last seen her on September 27th at about 12:45 to 1 a.m. at 21st and Aldrich, North Minneapolis. He remembered the bars were still open. Eddie said that he was with her because he would watch her back sometimes while she worked. He knew Martha had at least $14 on her, and that would cover a taxi home to Brooklyn Park, which a bus would not travel that far that late. Martha told Eddie that she was going to go walk one more time down the block looking for a John. Martha left walking one way, and Eddie left walking the other way. They met again on the corner of 21st and Aldrich a few minutes later. As Eddie walked towards Martha, he noticed a cinnamon-colored 1985 to 1987 Buick with two black males in the front pull up to the curb a short distance from where Martha was. When Eddie and Martha began talking, the car drove away. Martha said she was going to try one more time for a John, and she would meet him by the phone booth in a few minutes where she would call a cab and go home. They both go their way. When Eddie returned a short time later, Martha was not there. Eddie said he walked around the area for a while, searching for her until 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. He waited until about 8 a.m. that morning to call her residence and see if she made it home. Mike told her that she was not home. Eddie said her normal time with the John was 15 to 20 minutes, and she would have talked to him before leaving the area. He called several more times as the weeks went by, and either got the answering machine or spoke with Mike. Eddie also called her parents' home and tried to report her missing to the police. He said she may be carrying a small black shoulder bag and also wore a gold wrist bracelet that she got from Target for about $20. Eddie also said that Martha had a police officer friend by the name of Shelley, who works in Fridley and was a nice cop. Several employees of Murren's liquor store stated that Martha's ex-pimp and boyfriend was also a regular at the store, and he would beat Martha up on a daily basis. 2 weeks before her disappearance, she got away from that boyfriend and was associating with another black male. She would come into Murren's store multiple times a day and purchase 3 condoms at a time. They stated Martha was normally very quiet, and didn't say too much to anyone. She would sit by the back fence behind the store in the rear of the parking lot. She was seen every day the weeks before her disappearance. On September 25th, a witness reported they observed someone throw a box containing women's clothing and money from a truck window. This was along the road where most of Martha's remains would later be located in Wright County. Martha had asked Mike on September 26th to bring her to her parents' home to pick up more clothing, saying she needed dress clothes for job interviews. Could this possible dumping of clothing be connected to Martha, or was it just a strange detail? Another friend also stated Martha knew an undercover cop who would frequently buy her flowers, more specifically a rose and candy. But this friend said Martha didn't tell them his name or department. Martha said the cop would give her $80 to $100, quote, just to be seen with her. Farrell was an ex-boyfriend and pimp of Martha's. Martha came into the Domestic Abuse Project office, beat up with a cut on her finger. She said Farrell had done this, and the cut on her finger was a warning. He said the next time, he would cut her up into little pieces. Martha's final months in homicide is a very complex and heartbreaking story, with many different players and rabbit holes to fall into research-wise. Investigators may be aware of only a fraction of potential serial killers or predators we have in the area. At that time, about 1,000 sexual predators were released each year. Authorities had a hard time tracking them, and they were registered. Who knows how many people with the urge to kill were running around in 1993 who were not registered. Authorities can look for patterns, but predators can switch up their MO to stay off the radar. And as for Martha's case, she doesn't have much to compare it to in terms of similarities. I find 1993 a very interesting time for cold cases within Minnesota, and plan on delving into those women's cases in a future episode in relation to Martha Bacon's case. Many women's cases in the Twin Cities are unknown because they led a similar life to Martha. One of the problems with vulnerable victims like Martha is that Martha was murder number 8 before any media took notice, and a real look into the homicide cases as a potential serial killer by investigators. A predator can reach almost a double-digit number of victims before anyone in society or law enforcement takes real notice. If 2 or 3 girl next door type girls go missing and are murdered in a certain time frame within a certain area, police immediately would look into a pattern and the potential idea of a serial killer. The victims who don't fit that mold never get that type of investigation until it's way too late. Rest in peace to Martha Bacon, and I really hope that you have found the peace that you deserve so much in life. Please return for episode 12, where I'll share the start of my journey with Wright County victim Victoria Morris, before we keep diving into the cases of Martha Bacon and Vicky as a whole. Thank you for listening. Stay safe, everyone.